Hi everyone, for part 2 I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to work through all the way through from start to finish of the Windows domain build, domain controller, file server, web server, exchange server, but break them up into little snippets. So here we go. As we can see, I've got my folders ready to go: domain controller, file server, web server, exchange server, 3 clients, one Windows 10, one Windows 11 and one Ubuntu, as per the previous plan. Just a quick reminder of the network plan and the Windows domain plan that we did in the previous video. So today I'm going to be configuring the domain controller first, 192.168.10.1/24 with a default gateway of 254, and it's going to be the DNS server. Cool, so let's get our domain controller dc.ccs, so just using for the domain name workstation. I'm going to boot it up, get it started. I know it says file server, I've duplicated these. It's sort of a straight to desktop build with a default administrator password on, so let's get it started. This is using a pre-built license, so of 90 days usage for commercial non-commercial purposes. But you might have noticed then I press we copied it, so this changes the MAC address, so we shouldn't get any errors of GUID or MAC address conflicts. So booting straight to the desktop, I'm going to check a few details first. So maximize this on the screen, then quickly check the IP addresses, host names, change them if we need to. Then we'll get our domain controller built and Active Directory services installed. So first of all, IP address. I'm going to do the manual way, and then we'll quickly check command prompt. IP address 192.168, so we need to change this. So we are working with, if I delete from the 254 section, 192.168.10. Oh, let's do this correctly. 192.168.10 10.1/24, and our default gateway should be within our line 192.168.10.254, and because this is the domain controller, it's going to hold DNS itself, so this would normally get set during the default gateway build, but so I'm just going to verify and exit, double check it because I'm sure I left something out. No, that's all good, and okay. So one quick way we can check the computer name is through the computer itself. So if I go on this PC, right click properties, then it should come up with the name is server, so that's a bit of a vanilla name that I came up with. So we're calling it DC, and so that's its host name. Then it's fully qualified domain name is what we're going to set during the domain controller build. So I want to restart that now quickly. Cool. And once that's rebooted, I'll check the IP address and host name using ipconfig all on command prompt, and then we're going to install the Active Directory services. Cool, we'll just wait out a sec. So for this server, I'm using server 2019, so it's quite good to see quite a modern server built. Some corporations out there are still using Windows like server NT or 2003 or 12, for example. Obviously those have hit the end of life date for Windows, but this is sort of more modern ones. Now into server 2021 or 21. Cool. And because it's a VM, I'm doing Control Insert. Or another way I can press up here is press send Control Alt Delete to the VM. Cool. Oh. is my default password. Only for test builds. Only for test builds. So I can see server manager is going to pop up. That should verify our host name within a few clicks. So if I go local server, we should be able to see our host name on there. Maybe not our IP address. So we've got DC up here. It's part of a work group, so it's not part of a domain at the minute. And oh, it is. No, it's a correction. It's server 2022, which is good. I'm just going to quickly jump on command prompt. Get that loaded up. I think I might be going initially too quick for the server. ipconfig/all. I've got my IP address set and default gateway, DNS, happy days. I've got FE80, which is my IPv6 link local. We're not going to be playing with that yet, or this sort of video, and we've got a DC set. Brilliant. So now we're going to start installing Active Directory services. So if I want to, there's multiple ways I can do this. If I go local server, I can go manage, add server roles and features, next. And this is where we can start installing real stuff. So we can install DHCP, we can install TFTP or SNMP or syslog and web and IIS and exchange services. So this is where we sort of do it from. We're doing it to local or role based. We're doing it to this server. So I'm going to said we're going to deploy Active Directory services. So it's Active Directory's domain services. It takes a little minute to install, and then once it's installed, that's when we configure Active Directories. It should only take a little minute. I'm not going to take any extras just because this is going to install sort of the required software along with that. I always like to tick restart during the process, just because if it does require a restart, it should do it itself and it shouldn't come up with an error, where sometimes within this window it will say requires a restart, and it will say it's got an error or an issue, and it's not generally an informational, so it's almost getting you to restart, so allow it to do it itself. It should take a little minute to install. Sometimes it doesn't require a restart for Active Directory's services or domain services, but I will reboot it anyway as part of the process once it's installed, and we'll see a little red flag up here appear within the server manager itself to say that it's not been fully complete, but that's because we need to configure it as a domain controller. And as part of this is said it's going to be installing DNS as well and Group Policy Manager, which we'll be playing with in a minute. And once we've built our domain controller, we'll set up group policy and then see how it interacts with our clients once they're joined to the domain. Cool. Just while that's building, I know I went on command prompt earlier, but as an alternative, there is PowerShell. Generally, I consider with PowerShell there's a lot more tools available, but generally the same commands work on each, including a lot of Linux commands, whereas Linux commands don't generally work on command prompt. So PowerShell is a bit more of a tool of choice really for the modern day Windows administrator. Cool, so this is saying it's successfully installed. I'm going to close it. I'm actually going to restart the server. I know it sort of doesn't particularly require it, but we're about to make it domain controller, so it's good to have a clean break into it. So restart, that will restart the services, and then we'll continue the configuration of the domain controller prior to the installing users and things like that on Active Directory using computers. So welcome to Windows Domain. There's going to be a lot of restarting. Cool, so now we're actually back at the desktop. I'll do send control delete again and power password. Always typing in twice because first time's not lucky enough. We should have had our server manager should boot up initially, and it should say outstanding actions up here once it's dropped in. Here we go, and events, and we've got an exclamation mark up here, and it should say Active Directories isn't properly installed. It's saying promote to a domain controller. Brilliant. So correct terminology of a domain controller is the PDC, primary domain controller, or bigger than that, you've sort of got federated services within more cloud environments of Windows, but we're creating a on-prem or premises Active Directory. So we want to create a new forest effectively. So add a domain to an existing domain. No, because we haven't got one yet. Add a new domain controller to an existing forest. So that's a lot larger. So that we'd start talking about domain trusts then, where it goes from a domain to a tree to a forest, and then a rainforest if you're talking about multiple domains. So if you're talking about very large enterprises. So we're going to create this, and what's our root domain? So I said C core cyber. Oh no, cyber core skills course dot LAN. Was it .lan? Yep, and I had them in capitals. So I just cyber core skills course. Cool. I have to remind my name of the course. So there we go. We created that. That's in capitals. So the fully qualified domain name will be dc.ccsc.lan. We can have it all. We can almost back compatibilize our domain, but we're only going to have server 19 or server 22 servers running. So we want to have our global catalog installed. So global catalog is things like your FSMA roles and real key sort of concepts there. That's sort of more advanced Windows services or Windows users and features. We want to have DNS installed because this is going to be our DNS server, and I'm just going to set my this is my domain administrator password now, so I'm going to use a slightly different password to my local administrator one, just to prove there is a difference. Specify DNS delegation, so I'm not pointing my DNS anywhere else. NetBIOS comes up once we press next, so that's a bit of an older version of DNS, really. Sort of should, I know there'll be a few people watching that criticise. It's the way I consider it. You can use DNS or NetBIOS and sort of use them as almost like a NetBIOS as a fallback to DNS. And you can even join a domain, join a client to a domain using, instead of fully qualified domain name, using the NetBIOS name, so CCSC. Cool, but that's not always the best option to do because you don't get full security cover when doing that. Cool, so I'm just going to quickly show you about RAID very quickly. So if we wanted to configure our Active Directories databases and syslog servers and login servers on a different area, we could do. We could separate our hard drive up into different ones. So if there was multiple hard drives, here we go, and so from Server Manager on local files and storage devices, disks, we can select the allocated disk component. So I've allocated 60 gig to this server. Generally it's not a lot, but it's the minimum requirement required for this server. I could go new volume and then separate that into RAID 2, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 10. Each got different purposes, different advantages, like mirror, striped, or mirrored and striped with parity. Some are good for speed, some are good for backing up. So it depends how many drives you've got, and physical and software. Physical RAID is always better than software, but you can also set it up here for software. You can set physical RAID up on the BIOS, so when you first boot the device, if you've got multiple hard drives, then you can separate it through there. But this is like a software-based RAID here. Not always great, but I just wanted to quickly show you where it can be set up. So now that we've quickly spoken about RAID and where we could store the databases, it's not always great to store with in the C drive with the operating system, but in this simple build I'm going to be. And then you can review what we've sort of set. So you can see DNS, DNS delegations, no, we're installing it locally on the C drive, but we can choose a different location for the NTDS databases. So that will be like our user data and our usernames and passwords, for example. Login files, so that will be our Windows event viewers. Cool, so I'm just going to finish that and let that install, so that should be quite a quick installation. And once we've installed, then we can jump on, we'll check for errors, so that's all good, prerequisites, and so that should start installing. So we can install greater encryption algorithms for our passwords, that's what it's saying there. And parent zones, so we're holding DNS locally, so we're not using a higher authority. So if we were in a real corporate environment, we could point our DNS to a separate DNS server, which is always good to prevent overloading. Also, we could point it externally to a cloud source, for example. And I'm going to hold out for this video just to let you see how long it does take to set up this domain controller initially. I know it's quite a quick process once you've got it to the desktop. And once this is going through this section, generally I would try and jump on other servers and set up a file server at the same time, probably a bit of a file share. And then we would also set up some permissions once we've got our domain controller set up with a couple of users, which we'll be doing straight after this anyway. Cool. And to prevent any confusion, I'm going to do these videos one at a time. So just domain controller, everything on the domain controller. Then I'm going to do file server, then web server, just because it's quite a quick install. Then I'm going to do the Exchange server. Cool. Which you'll see in order, hopefully. So you can see securing Kerberos there, so that's a ticketing system for multiple sign-on or single sign-on, for example. Cool, so this is going to ask us to reboot and close, and I'm going to reboot the system. So it's always better to reboot after you do anything major, really, but after you've installed Windows Active Directories. Cool. And then it refreshes. We can do a bit of a check to say that the domain control is on a domain, but we're going to click into Active Directories, users and computers, and we're going to see the domain name appear. Brilliant. I'll ditch out until they get to the desktop. So it does take a little bit longer to boot because it's now got the final installation, what's going on in the background with Active Directories using computers and the domain services. So once we get to the desktop, we'll leave it settle for a second, then we'll try login. So the thing is with Windows, after you've installed anything or any updates, even though it might install it before the shutdown, there's always a little bit of work to do after. Cool. Desktop, so send control delete. And we can see there our domain. Let's see if we can log in first time with password. That's good. So that's my domain administrator password I'm logging on with now. Wait for everything to boot. Cool, and if I click on local server, we should be able to see the domain name appear now. And we can. Just can close this and open up users and computers. Users and computers. Oh, I'll show the full menu really. So start. Administrator tools, there's a lot more administrator tools than there was before we installed directory services. So site, system and services, so that's using, if we're going in for more foresty type stuff, there is Active Directory services, so we can pull up using computers within this. So just quickly expand this. So Active Directory's Administration Center is very much like a central point for all Active Directory's services. So within this, it will look familiar and it will look very much like Active Directory's using computers that we're going to go on in a minute. So when I double click users, we'll see all of this. But a lot of the ways of working are still talking about Active Directory's using computers. So within this domain, well, we can see here, we can see the connected LAN, for example, and the connected DC. I'm going to open up users and computers. So within start, administrators tools, users and computers here. Load this up. We can confirm the domain name as ccsc.lan. Expand this, we can see the users here, which is just like the previous window. We can see the guest account is disabled. We can see our domain administrator account. We can also expand our computers, which we don't have any yet. We can expand domain controllers, and we've got one. So no computers, we've got domain controllers, we've got no managed services or managed protocols, we've got no bulletins either, which is built in groups. So what within here, we're going to be adding a couple of users, a couple of local groups and global groups, and adding them into each other. So we might as well do it now. So if I just create a quick test user, so user here. So to do that, I click users, right click within this area, new, and we can see here we've got users, printers, shared folders, groups. So within there we have security groups and mail groups. So I'm going to click users and test user 1. Obviously you can have the first name, but I'm just going to do test user 1. That's going to be their sort of profile name. Password, set password of a certain level of complexity that is required by this server. Make sure they match as well. Third time a charm. And the most secure is disabled initially, and must change password upon first logon. So when you hand over the password, we unlock their account. But within the training environment, what I'm going to do is set up user cannot change password and password never expires. So this is only a test environment, just to make it easier. I know that that password is not going to be changed. Then press OK. So we've got a user here. A user will go into as we planned earlier. So just show you this. So a user will go into a global group, and then a global group gets put into the local group, and then the local group goes into the local resource. So this is sort of like, this is on the file server side, and this is more on the domain controller, because a global group can be used by multiple domain controllers within a forest. No, I've thrown it out there, but that's just the sort of one line we have to get used to. So I'm going to quickly create the global group. So if I go new group, click security group and global. So I've got domain local, which will be the next level up on, then we set it, the permissions on the folder. Then we've also got universal, which applies the permission on all the universally against every forest and every domain. Cool. So if we just name our global group, and it's good to have a nice naming convention. gg.test users, and it's a security domain local. And actually I nearly did that wrong then. We're going to go for global group, so it's always good to read through it out loud or double check. Cool. So we've got our global group then, and we've got our new security group and LG underscore test users. And as I said, what we're going to do, I know I keep bringing it through, and it's sort of bad practice what I've done, not explaining things. I mean, so this whole theory is called A account, G for global group, DL for domain local, and P for permissions. So AGDLP. Okay, it's quite a bit of a universal way of working. So I'm going to create two local groups called test users read write and read only, and then we're going to apply that and see what access different users have. So this one's going to be read only, and press OK, and I'm going to go for new group. There are different frameworks of applying. Oh, did I change the look at that? Hold on. So I gave it local group. Let's see what type of group. Global, and I gave it local. That's naughty. Delete. Yes. Cool. Sometimes there are protection on Active Directories that we can turn on and off. And if you go within options, you can turn that on and off. Cool. Right. So new group. And we'll go for global group underscore test users. And it's got to be a global group. happy days. Global group security GG already exists. Cool. Right, I didn't actually delete it in the end. Right click, new. Oh, is that protected? Hold on. This is what I was trying to show you earlier. Delete, yes. Oh, it's gone. Refresh. Okay, so it's not protected. Right, let's start again quickly. So new group GG underscore test users global group security, happy days, and right click new group local domain local, so it's only local to our domain and our domain controller, so it's ccsc.lan lg underscore test users read only domain local and group. I can go lg underscore test users read write. Cool. So we've got our two local domain local groups here, and they're sort of even named for the permissions that we're going to be setting on these later on the file server. But what I'm going to do is add this user into this global group and then that global group into read only. So when I set the permissions on this group, whatever files sit in a later folder that I bring up, so I'll just bring up the plan again. So whatever permissions sit on here for the read only group, because we're only adding that user and that group into read only, they shouldn't be able to write into the documents there. They should only be able to read at the time. So let's do that. If I go, let's start from the bottom up. So the user is a member of domain users as standard, so that's where they get some of their group policies from. If I go GG underscore, and then we've only got one global group, I've added them in there, add them in there, and then apply OK, and then we can go to our global group and then member of, and go LG, and then we're going to go read only for this one. Cool. We'll test our permissions out later, prove we can't write into a document. So we've got users, global groups, and our other groups there, our domain local groups. I'm just going to add a folder. So this folder here is known as a organizational unit. So an organizational unit is a folder within Active Directories, but it allows us to apply group policy on this later. So we'll show you what that appears as. So protect container from accidental deletion. I don't mind deleting things, so I'm going to untick that. You have to then go into options and then untick it, and then go advanced view to be able to delete that. So I'm going to call this test users for our domain, and then add our GGs and my users into that. Cool. So everyone's sat in there, so the test users, and later our computers, when we join into the domain, will jump into there. Brilliant. So we've got users, we've got no computers yet. I'm going to quickly show you group policy. So if I go group policy, and we've got our forest here, which is actually our domain, so we expand that. So this is where we can set group policies that affect the entire domain. So it's things like forgetting last user logon or security messages as you log on. So we'll be applying a security group policy that will allow security message when you first log on to the domain. So when you press OK or Control Delete, it'll display a little SIOPS message there for you to abide by, and they're sort of normally legally contracting for acceptable use policy and things like that. So we'll set up that group policy now. So within group policy, if we expand domains and then we expand our own domain, we can see our organizational units here, and we can see our test users. So you can either apply group policy to a computer or a user. So we've dropped our users and groups into test users, but there is a defined difference. We can see domain controllers and we can see our test users here. If I quickly bring up using computers again, we can't see this organisation unit computers within group policy, and that's because it's a bit of a safe haven. So it sort of makes you move computers that you've joined to the domain out of that OU into different OUs. So you can say, like, specifically, if I wanted an OU just for test users, like general users, and whatever software or security policies that general computers have, then that'll be it. But as we know, within IT and cyber, there might be bespoke softwares like Wireshark or FTP software that we don't, or PuTTY, that we don't want standard users to have access to, because it can give you increase of leverage of an access, for example. We can give it to them if it's really needed for their daily tasks, but we can install that specific software due to specific computers only. We can control that via group policy, and we can even move computers out, GP update them, which I'll show you, and limit that access and change it and move it about. So I'm just going to create another OU, new organizational unit, and I'm going to call it admin terminals. So I'm going to untick that because I want to delete it afterwards. So if I want to, when I get a client, a Windows 10 or 11 or another machine, I'm going to drop it into here, and whatever group policies we assign on this admin terminals OU will appear. So we go back on group policy. We should see after a quick refresh, I'll reload it. So it's always better to work from fresh. Group policy, group policy manager, there we go. And we've got our admin terminals up here. So we're going to set a group policy based on some of these OUs. So best thing to go is group policy objects, go right click new, name the group policy object. So this one we're going to do a SIOPS message for initial login. So login message, you press OK, and then we can edit that, right click edit, and we can set the group policy that we want. And then as soon as we've edited it and set it up how we want, we can then link it to an existing GPO. So we can go link the OU to the GPO, so link the organization unit to the group policy object. So we just simply press OK on that. But stand by, we're going to quickly set up the initial logon message. So in Group Policy Manager, if we want to link for the logon message, it's a computer-based group policy, so we're going to apply it to our admin terminals, and we could apply it to any other sort of OUs that's going to contain computers in once, and then we go link existing GPO, and this is the logon message that we had. We go, and so we've linked that. We can go right click edit now, and we go for this. Group policies are everywhere, they're quite complex, and you can download a sort of a baseline set from Microsoft themselves, and basically that gives you a bit of certain level of clearance. But at the minute we're quite open. If we do have clients joined to the domain, they're quite open to sort of using and misusing the system. So just as a sort of security, we're going to give them a word of warning to say acceptable use policies in force. So we're going to go for computer policies, then security, Windows settings, security settings, local policies, and security options. And there's loads of things we can do in here. So it's all about, for us, it's the interactive logon here. So I'm going to have initially where we can see the title of the users attempting to log on. So this is the title, define the title. You are you're being watched. No unauthorized logons. Cool. That's sort of, if that's not threatening enough, I don't know what it is. Right. So then we predefine that. We pressed OK. We can give an example there of what it does, and the text. So act as per acceptable use policy. I know it's terrible English, I do apologise. Right, apply, it's only a quick example, and then we can What I'm going to do is get rid of the last user logon as well. So last user sign in, display, do not display last sign in. Do not display user at sign in. So I'm going to enable that. So do not display last user sign in. So that'll be if you approach a computer and you could see the last person who's logged onto it. That's quite a bad security feature itself. I know the creator of Control-Alt-Delete didn't like even Control-Alt-Delete because of the amount of extra effort it takes, so you can get rid of that and do them a favour. But I'm going to leave it as it is. So we've got those sort of three things defined really, and then all we need to do is press X on that. And really good practice is once we set up some group policies, we can do GP update. So there's a couple of different commands: GP update, GP update /force, or GP results /R. So GP update tells you, pushes out our update. GP update forces a restart of the computer if it's required, and GP results /R from a client perspective can show you what group policies are effective. So if I do GP update /force now, and if any group policies affect the domain controller, software wise it might want to restart. So not an amazing thing if it's a production level domain controller, but this is sort of test environment, not wholly in use. So we use force quite sparingly in a production environment. So and GP result /R. GP helps if you spell it correctly. RESULT. Well done. This will build up a list of what group policies are affecting us. So we shouldn't see our last user logon or logon message banner here. So no, we can't. So these are our default group policies that are affecting the domain controller. Brilliant. So we've pushed that out, and now any clients that join to the domain will have this affected. Initially, only if we move them out of that computer OU, as I sort of explained earlier here. They need to be moved out of here because no group policies can be applied at that OU level. Brilliant. So what we need to do is now is join a couple of clients to the domain, get them logged on, and then what I'll do is set a couple of profiles and sort of home folders as well, and we'll give them a test. So I'm going to jump onto a Windows box now, get them joined to the domain. Cool. So jumping on our Windows 10 box first, let's add that one to the domain. Let's get it booted. It might be in a state where it was already in a state of boot, or we might need to boot it from start. We'll check its IP address, we'll check its computer name, and then we'll change them, get them rebooted, and then get it joined to the domain as a after step. It's never good to rename something and get it to join the domain at the same time, because that's too much going on, especially within sort of the NetBIOS stuff that we saw earlier. So we are booting, and it was on screensaver, so we're now booted. Happy days. And let's just get that to do the full screen. So if I go view, fit guest, keep free stretch. There we go. Oh, that looks a bit horrible. Now view, keep ratio. Cool. That's because it's not got VMware tools installed. So I will do that after the boot actually, which is a good practice. So VMware tools gives you a lot more. Gives you drag and drop into the VM itself, which is really good. Right, let's change adapter settings, properties, configure, and this is set up for a bit of a crazy build. 10 dot, and we were going for, so in accordance with the planner, Windows 10 was 10.110, 10.110, and 10.254 was our default gateway. We're sort of quite lucky that things, and our DNS server is going to be our domain controller, so that's going to be 10.1. And once we've joined our client to the domain, I'll quickly run over and show you DNS. Brilliant. So press OK on that. So that should set. Press OK. Let's go check the computer name. There's a few ways of doing this, but I find it quite easy just to go properties on this computer. And we've got a weird desktop name which is auto-generated by Windows. Let's call this one, let's look at the plan, Win 10, very original, like it, Win 10, and that should ask for a change. But before we restart, I'm just going to install VM tools, see if that quickly works. So VM, reinstall tools, install, it attaches a virtual ISO. So obviously on a real machine you won't be doing this, but here we go. I'm just going to quickly run this in and then let this reboot, and at the same time as it's going to be installing, it's going to be rebooting, installing VM tools, and also when it reboots it'll set the computer name. Cool. Let's take a little second. Normally it does pop up. Oh, it's already running. Oh, there we go, it's in the background. So next, want to modify. So it appears it's already been installed. Change. So let's hopefully try reinstall it. And then let it reboot and then see what happens. Finish. Cool. Right, I'm going to reboot this. And the computer name will change, but it won't have yet joined the domain. We'll come back once this is rebooted. Cool, so we've got to desktop, and it's a fancy one at that. Let's get it logged on. Hopefully first time lucky. And we're in. Then let's check everything from command prompt side, ipcon /all, which will get the finer details. So we should have computer name, Windows 10 or Win 10, IP address 192.168.10.110/24, default gateway in the same network, and 10.1 is our domain controller. Brilliant. We're all good to join the domain. So easiest way to join the domain is type join the domain. Might work on some, guess not. So what I'm going to do is show you the alternative way. On some computers it does work. Is right click, properties. Depends how they simple things down in this. If we go rename this compute PC advanced, this is the original menu from previous versions of Windows 10 and others, and I don't know why they seem to consider this advanced, but this is what it used to look like. So it's got description up there. Lots of people want to type the domain name in there, but don't, because that's the description and not the domain name. So this is where we put our domain name, csc.lan. Press OK, and providing we've got our DNS IP address correctly, it should come up. And put our domain administrator password in there, username and password, and then within a few seconds it should come up with correct if you spelled it correctly. So I'll try it again. I've typed it a little bit too quickly. And there we go, second time's the banger. So we're in, and press OK on that, OK again, and close and restart. So that's going to restart, it's going to join the domain. I'm going to quickly jump onto the domain controller and show you the DNS. So on our domain controller, I'm just going to close everything. If I go start, active directories and DNS. DNS is in itself can be quite a complex topic, but if I go forward zones So DNS, this is our DNS server. So DNS can be broken into two different things. It's either domain name service or domain name server. This is our domain name server providing the domain name service to the domain. Good times. So we click on ccsp.lan. We see here that we've got our domain controller and we haven't got anything else. But as the client's rebooting, good, like by magic, our Windows 10 machine has magically popped in there and populated. So it's got the IP address, so it's dynamically being added into our DNS. There are different types of records. So we've got A records, which are IPv4. We've got, I'll show you, AAAA, which is IPv6, MX, which is our mail server. We can do DNS with SEC, which is secured DNS. And we can add CNAME, which is alternative or alias names, and there's loads of different types of DNS. Cool. We can add comments in as well. So we've got forward and reverse. So if we're providing it for different domains, or RARP, for example, which is reverse ARP, address resolution protocol. Cool. Right, and we're in. So obviously DNS resolves IP address to name, whereas ARP does IP address to MAC address. Bit different. Cool. Now we're in, and we've got our written our Active Directories. We should have rebooted now, and we're still in the small screen, which is a little bit confusing. But I can see here I've got my user, which is my local user, or I've got my other user. So I'm just going to do test user 01, capital P at SSW0ID. And we're in, should be in. Helps if I spell user correctly. That seems to be the common theme on this course at the minute, but. And we're in, capital P. This is good. Right, so now what we have to do is a little bit of troubleshooting, so it shouldn't be too hard. We're back on the Active Directories using computers. And what I'm going to do is reset the password for this user. So test user 1, what am I using? Test user 01. There we go. Know what you've got. So we're now logging on and we're pulling our profile as such from the server. But we're going to set up a few little bits, like we're going to set up a home and profiles folder, and we're also going to dump the Windows 10 machine into the administrator terminal OU, just to ensure that it gets the group policies applied. So we'll do that now while it's sort of giving us the logon spiel that Windows 10 likes to do. So back on our domain controller, I've got, if I click on computers, we've now got our Windows 10 one here. I'm going to chuck this into our admin terminals. You don't have to give it a big like mouse swoop in, but I've moved it into our admin terminals. So that's going to get the group policies applied. And actually, they're not going to be applied this time. They'll be applied next time. So I'm going to quickly do a GP update on here. GP update. It's going to update. It's going to go to the domain controller and go, have you got any group policies? It's going to say yep, and it's going to update them for us, which is going to be our effectively our logon one. And I can double check that GP result //. This isn't normally a admin task, but it's just to add in the benefits. So within this, we can see what local groups we got read only here, and we should see. Everyone. So those are the groups that I'm in. Where are my group policies? Group policies applied NA. So that I guess we're going to have to log on and log off for it to take effect. So I'm going to quickly restart this client. and then log on as a user, this test user. So we're rebooted. I'm just going to click on it, and then you're being watched. No unauthorized logons. Should be a computer act in accordance with computer policy. We've still got other users, so we haven't got our last user creds either. So test user test user 1, and whether there we go, and we're in. I'm just going to do one more little enhanced feature just to give a home profile folder and then log off and log on again for it to take effect. So we've seen our group policies now working. Back to our domain controller, I'm going to set up a home and profiles folder quickly for our users. So test user 1, if I right click properties and go account or profile, I can see here that I can set some local profile folders for them. So I'm just going to create them on our domain controller. Normally it would be done on a file server, but I'm just going to sort of do it from the domain controller side. And I can always move it over once we've set up our file server correctly. So if I just create it here on the C drive and go new folder and go shared. So this is going to be a bit of an introduction into sort of shared home and profile folders. Or should I leave this? No, I'll do it now. Cool. And then it completes off our user sort of setup. So I'm going to create a home folder, set up a user folder, and then go right click properties, share. I prefer to go advanced share this folder with a $sign. So adding a $sign hides it, then permissions, and I want full control for everybody, which is just bad practice, but it's just for the training environment. And then once we're in that folder, then it'll only be the users of those folders that will be allowed to edit them really. So we're in there, it's shared, and if I go the same thing, instead of users, I'm going to name it profile, and go right click properties, share, advanced share, and hide it with a $. Do permissions. I could do individuals within that, but then cool. So I've set the permissions. I've given everyone full control, which is bad, but it's just quick to get it working. And now I'm going to set this within the user. So properties, profiles, and //. So this is going to be not our C drive, which will be local. So I've got to set this from a network perspective. So if I quickly go back on here, go on our profiles and then click sharing, that's our globally recognized one. That's our globally recognized path, or our networked path. So back on here, properties, paste. So what I would want to do is add in the full domain name as well. So ccsc.lan, then / and I'm going to add in wildcards here. This just throwing it in. Username, %sign username. So when we press apply, it's going to wildcard that and substitute it for the wildcard of the name. So that's our profiles path. I'm going to add in connect on H drive, I think, for a home folder. That sounds quite sensible. And then give the full path for this. So we call it we shared it as home. So just edit the existing stuff that we've got, that paste it in. .ccsc.lan and / %sign username %sign. Don't need a capital U there. And apply, and that should switch them round. If you've seen that populate, press OK on that. We can go and check out the state of our folders. So the home folder of tester 1 has appeared, but the profile hasn't, and that's because it's got to do a log on and log off first. So I'm just going to quickly log on as that user, log off, and probably log back on just to prove the population of that one folder just there. So let's get to our Windows 10 machine. Log off. Log off. Switch user. Nope. sign out. That's it. That's the posh way of saying log off. So quickly jump on our domain controller. Keep an eye on this. Control refresh, which should be F5. So it might need a sign on and a sign off, but it does take a little bit of fault finding. There are group policies that can be added to the profiles folder to apply the administrator user or group in by default, because actually you shouldn't be able to access them, but the administrator should and must, but at the minute they probably can't. I'm just going to log back on. And it's test. See if it's created on our... Yay! So test user 1 and V6 means it's above a server 2012 configuration. Brilliant. If it was a server 2016, if it was 12 it'd be version 2, and if it's predecessor of that, server 2003, it'd just be user 01. So if you've got multiple domain controllers and you're working with that, then you might see multiple home folders. Cool. So that's V6 is working with 2016. So we've got that. I'm just going to quickly show you what the perspective is from the user. And if I go home folder, just click down here, we're actually starting to get a little bit of user acceptance, so we should see the H folder there. And if I right click and just create a text document and call it test and go back on the domain controller, we'll see it populate over here. So on our domain controller we can see, go into this folder, we don't normally have permissions but we can force it. 2 secs. Right, up. I'm going to add permission, security, advanced, permissions continue, K, effective access, change owner. I'm just going to change it to just to proof of concept, just to show you that. Oh, Windows, here we go, right click, refresh. Oh, that's profiles, that's why. Home folder, and we've got our test document there, which was created on the client. Cool, so that's pretty much the domain control squared away. We've done DNS, the group policy, security, added a client to the domain, created a user, create groups, done a profiles and folders, share, and we've spoken a little bit about permissions as well. I'm going to quickly do an additional bit, so I'm going to install DHCP quickly and switch our client over so it gets a DHCP allocated address. This is just back in our domain controller. If I go server manager, which is probably one of the main areas we can install our features and roles, excuse me. So if I go manage, install roles, we can remove roles, but install roles. We'll let it slow down first, I'm going a bit too quick. There we go. And next, yep, we want to install it on this server. Give it a little second. To catch up, I'm going to press next because it's going to be a server feature and then DHCP. Oh no, it is a server role. So if I just tick it, add features, next, and next, and install. It's quite a quick installation to make it a DHCP server. And then we'll quickly set that up and configure our client to switch over to DHCP. Because it's in the same LAN, then it'll broadcast out using that the DORA process. Discover, offer, respond, and acknowledge. Cool. So that's installing. Trying to squeeze as much information in these videos as I can during the waiting period. Hope it's appreciated. So DHCP servers installing, dynamic host configuration protocol. Bits that can be spoofed with this within security is like a DHCP spoof attack. So you can be a rogue DHCP server and overwrite. You can do DHCP exhaustion. So we're working within a Class C network. We've already allocated a few IP addresses, and within that, if we suddenly request, if a Kali box comes in and requests over 1,000 IP addresses, it can suddenly exhaust and cause a bit of a DOS for the network, and then failure of a DHCP will cause a PIPA address, a 169.254 address. Cool. So that's now installed. Close. I'm not particularly worried about rebooting after this, unless it really says it. Complete configuration. So we've got to actually set up the DHCP. So we've got to come up with, we're doing it with the administrator rights, and commit. Oh. So within DHCP, if I click on it with the server manager, right click, DHCP manager, should open up our DHCP here, and then expand our server, IPv4, because that's what we're playing with, right click, new scope, and then we can add our new scope. So we want name, so test LAN, or no, I'll call it more something more punchy, CCSC LAN. Then I can add a description if you want. So start IP address, we've already used 110, we want to use 111 for the Windows 11, I want to add 112 for the Ubuntu machine later, so I'm going to add 113 onwards, so 192.168.10.113 for starting, end 192.168.10. Let's say 20, so 1120. It's only going to be a small pool, so we're doing a length or CIDR slash notation of 24, so that's the subnet mask. Let's see if that increases. So if I go 25, does Windows, look at that, it changes for the increments. Nice. Well, if I did that, that would be really bad because that only gives you 2 usable. That's my favourite subnet. Right, so slash 24, excluded addresses, but because we're only we're only using such a small range within that anyway, so there's no need to do excluded addresses. Normally you'd exclude whatever host range you're already using, but because we're using the up and a smaller range, there's no need to. 8 days is default for our lease, so I'm just going to delete that and give it 24 hours. Let's go for 24 hours, even though it is Monday and it's gone to 23 hours. Cool. Do you want to configure these options? So I want DNS server and wins, so this is entering our default router, so this is our default gateway, 192.168.10.254. At the mid, 168.10.254. Add next. So we want to, this is going to be our, that's our DNS server, server IP address. If I click that, can I add? Or that, no, I already selected core win server, I'm not particularly worried about. Active scope, yes, activate scope now. Finish, so we've got our active, we can see our leases within here. So if I click here, we should see this populate in a minute when I chop over our Windows 10 machine to DHCP. So we're on our Windows 10 machine here, and all I'm going to do is chop it over to DHCP. So options, Ethernet, change adapt options, and oh, it's asking because we're logged on as a user, we haven't got the rights to, so it's asking for my domain administrator credentials. And then here we go, IPv4, ask and ask, press OK, OK, and as I'm doing that, that's asking and it's identifying, so that's doing the DORA process. And network 2, allow network discovery, yes, and IP config, no, CMD. So that's us with 192.168. Oh no, so that's done it for our virtual LAN. So that's actually gone for another DHCP server, so that's not actually the one that we wanted. I wonder if it's issued one as well. Hold on 2 secs. Let's go refresh here. So it has issued it, and it's issued it to number 10, but it's been counter jumped by another one. So I'm not going to focus too much on that. So that's pretty much our domain controller sorted. Next little snippet or video will be our file server. Thanks for watching.